Hey there, Hobby Warriors. It's Bernard with JTS, and I'm back with a new video. Today, we're going to be going over my top 5 picks for beginner-friendly war games for 2021. So let's just dive right in. So, evaluation criteria. I want to talk about this first. My number one criteria is entry cost. As many people know, tabletop wargaming can be a very expensive hobby. Especially when you're first starting out. However, the games that I wanted to take a look at are games that are not going to be as big of a hit on your wallet compared to, say, Warhammer 40k or Age of Sigmar, where it's actually kind of common to end up spending, $1,000 or more on an army. We're looking at something that's not so expensive, a little bit easier on the wallet. I do, however, want to mention that I am not taking into account hobby supplies. We are purely looking at things that you need to buy in order to play the game itself and have a complete experience playing the game. We're not going to be talking about paints and so forth in this video. So number 2, accessibility. Is the game widely available? Is there an active community for the game? Are you going to be able to find people to help you understand the game? Are you able to find an opponent easily? And then lastly, number 3, we're looking at the rule set. So are the rules easy to understand from a beginner's perspective? And how many rule books do you need? Everyone knows, some of the big games like Warhammer 40k, Age of Sigmar, your rules might be scattered across a couple of different books, and that can be pretty hard on a beginner. So that's the 3 criteria that we're using. So without further ado, let's hop into the list. So coming in at number 5, I put Kill Team by Games Workshop. Now, Kill Team barely made the list, and as you can see from my rankings on the screen, it's not in a great place right now. The only reason why I decided to still include it is because it is a gateway product into Warhammer 40k, which is, by any account, one of the largest war games, if not the largest war game in the world right now. So for entry cost, I went 2 out of 5 stars. The biggest detractor here is that the starter set is no longer in production, which means you're not getting a bundle discount on all of those starter items. You have to buy them separately. So you're going to be looking at roughly about $250 USD in order for you to buy a force, all 3 of the rule books, and a terrain set so that you have a board that you can play on. Now, if you are able... Oh, I'm sorry, 300 USD. If you are able to find a starter set on the third-party market, say like eBay, or maybe at your friendly local game shop, it's probably going to cost you around $250 USD. So you can get yourself a little bit of a savings there if you can find one, but if not, you're going to be looking at $300 USD to get everything that you need. For accessibility, I went 3 out of 5 stars. The pros here, it uses the same exact minis as Warhammer 40k. So your availability for army building is very, very high. But some of the detractors where I docked some stars are that, again, the starter set is out of production. And then when the game had first launched, they had these really nice faction sets where you got a playable kill team, a whole kill team right out of the box. And then you also got some scenery inside the set. But those faction sets are no longer in production. And this, again, makes it a little bit harder for new people getting into the game. Now, lastly, the rules, unfortunately, are split across 3 rulebooks. And they're all pretty critical for playing the game. So the core manual It's $40. Then there were 2 expansions. The Kill Team Elites expansion added the ability to run more elite units in your army. And then the Kill Team Commanders expansion added headquarters units to the game. And like I said, you really need all 3 books to be able to play. You could just get started with the core manual. But if you're playing with existing experienced players, they're going to have the elites in the Commanders expansion rules, and you're really, really going to want to get your hands on those books. So my overall pros and cons, again, number 1, pros, miniatures can be used in 40k. So if you're going to play Astra Militarum and Kill Team, your Cadian Guard, for examples, or your Tempestus Scions that you may be using in your Kill Team, those are viable units that you can use in Warhammer 40k. And this fact really makes Kill Team a great bridge product into building a 40k army. Because it uses 40k miniatures, it's very easy to find an opponent. Almost any gaming store that has 40k product and a gaming space for people to play, almost any 40k player is going to have a copy of these rules. And, if you're a new person and you're going into that store and you're looking for an opponent to play with, somebody would be able to play a game with you. Even if they didn't have the rules themselves, but you did, it only takes, 1 or 2 units out of their army, and then you could actually teach them how to play Kill Team with you. So it's very easy to find an opponent, and because it's a small skirmish game, it doesn't really require that much table space. So this makes it a really great game for playing at home, say on your kitchen table, where you can, play a game, pack everything away, and put your table back so that your family can use it when you're done. Now, cons, without dedicated starter products, it's very expensive to start playing. For $300, you could honestly, just grab a copy of the Warhammer 40k rulebook, grab some units for whichever army you were interested in, and just learn how to play, smaller games of Warhammer 40k. It's a pretty hefty price tag. However, one of the nice things with Kill Team is that at its core, it is a narrative game system. Narrative rules are baked into the rule set. So if you do find yourself more attracted to narrative rules, maybe you're coming from an RPG background, it may still be worth buying into Kill Team for you. As it stands, Warhammer 40k's narrative rules are getting better, but they're not quite there yet. And then lastly, and this personally is my biggest con, ongoing support from Games Workshop right now is unclear. So when the game first launched, it had tons of support. Like I mentioned, you had that great starter product. You had the faction sets so that while you were building your army, you were also building your terrain collection. But all of those products have since gone away. Like I said, you can still find some on the third-party market, but it is very, very, very hard in order to get your hands on that starter set. And that's really the biggest detriment. And with those products having been released and now going out of print, it just really leaves the game in a dubious spot. We don't know if Games Workshop is going to kill the game entirely, which they have done in the past with some of their smaller games that weren't selling well, or if maybe we'll see a resurgence post-COVID. We just don't know right now. So moving on, Number 4, we have Warcry by Games Workshop. Now, Warcry is the Age of Sigmar equivalent of Kill Team. The games do use different rule sets. However, this product is meant to be your gateway into Age of Sigmar. So, for the breakdown, for the entry cost, I went ahead and gave them 3 out of 5 stars. Their 2-player starter set is still in production, and it is priced at $210 USD. That starter set really is a complete experience in a box. You get 2 warbands, 2 complete warbands. You get all your terrain, you get your gaming boards, you get your dice, you get your rulers. Everything you need to play the game is in that box. Now, if you're a single player and you don't like the 2 warbands that come in the starter set, you can go ahead and buy a force. You can buy all the necessary rulebooks and a terrain set, and you're going to be coming in around about the same price. Again, $210. For accessibility, I went ahead and rated them 4 out of 5 stars here. The warbands that are used in the warbands used in Warcry are also used in Age of Sigmar. So availability is high. All of these products are still being produced. They're not out of production at the moment. Now, lastly, with number 3 for the rules, I had to give them 1 out of 5 stars here. The rules are not in a great place right now. There are currently 8 rule books. However, not every rulebook applies to every warband. So you have a core rulebook. You have the Catacombs expansion, which is, instead of playing on open terrain, you're playing like in an underground dungeon. You've got an annual rules update book. And then for each of the Age of Sigmar Grand Alliances, so you've got Order, Death, Destruction, and Chaos, you have a rule book for each one of those affiliations that has additional rules for making custom warbands from the miniatures in each of those product lines. So you don't necessarily need all 8 rulebooks, but there are 8 rulebooks that are there, and that can make it very confusing for a new person to know exactly what it is that they need to buy to get started. So for the pros and cons, on the pro side, very similar to Kill Team. Again, the miniatures used for Warcry can be used in Age of Sigmar. With this being a Games Workshop product, it's very easy to find an opponent. Again, you got that small gaming area, makes playing at home a breeze. And that 2-player starter set is a great self-contained experience in a box. Now for the cons, it takes a lot of research to know exactly which books you need to buy. If you're in doubt, I definitely suggest you can hit up the Reddit communities, there are Facebook communities. You could talk to somebody within your friendly local gaming store, and they'll be able to help you out. But like I said, there's 8 rule books, and you're not going to need all of them. My second con is that only the pre-made warband boxes come with unit cards that have all your stats and everything printed on them, and it's a great gaming accessory. However, if you're going to make custom warbands, those unit cards are no longer in production for the extended miniature line. So you might be able to find some packs on the third market, again, like eBay, but those unit cards just aren't in production anymore. And it's really sad because it's a fairly cheap product, but it makes the gaming experience just so much easier so that you're not flipping back and forth through 8 rulebooks. And then lastly, similar to Kill Team, ongoing support from Games Workshop is unclear. So Warcry is definitely in a better position than Kill Team right now. Their starter set, all of their starter boxes are still in production. However, it has been a really long time since we've had any news about new releases. So it's just really unclear right now which way Games Workshop's gonna go with the product. All right, so moving on. Number 3, we've got Marvel Crisis Protocol by Atomic Mass Games. Now, this is personally one of my favorite. It's a great game, and anyone who grew up with Marvel Comics, this is a license that people, love to game with. It's an absolute joy to play. However, it does come in at number 3. It's not all perfect. So, first up on the breakdown, we've got the entry cost. The core set is actually reasonably priced at $100 USD, but it is a mandatory purchase. All of your gaming components, so the measuring gauges, all your tokens, are all in that box, and that is the only way to obtain those items. So you are forced to buy the core set. It's highly recommended that you also pick up the NYC Terrain Pack that I have pictured on screen, which is another $50 USD. Now, the core box does come with some terrain items. You get the Daily Bugle building, you get the lamppost, you get a garbage dumpster, and the 2 cars that are actually pictured. But the reason why I suggest picking up that terrain pack is that with what comes in the box, that's not really enough terrain to have a satisfying experience. But when you combine that terrain set from the core box with that NYC terrain pack, you've got a pretty nice, sizable table's worth of terrain to go ahead and play the game with. Now, accessibility, I rated them pretty high, 4 to 5 stars here. You've got the power of the Marvel license partnered with Asmodee Publishing. You can find this game literally everywhere. They have it in bookstores. It's everywhere online, Amazon, eBay. It'll be in your friendly local gaming store. It'll be in comic book shops. It's even in card gaming shops. It's literally everywhere. For the rules, I went ahead and rated them 5 out of 5 stars. This is a great rule set for beginners. The rules are included for free in the core set, and then they're also available online in PDF format on the Atomic Mass Games website. Very, very, very simple rule set, easy for a beginner to pick up, and a lot of the tactical options are not necessarily in the rules, but it's in your individual character cards. So learning the game itself is very easy, and then it's actually your characters that give you all of your options. So for the pros and cons, so number 1 on the pros, very reasonably low cost of entry, and that includes the cost of the additional terrain. These miniatures are actually a larger scale. So for people that aren't familiar, Games Workshop miniatures are what people call 28 millimeter heroic scale, which means for your average human, from their feet up to their eyes, is roughly 28 millimeters. I believe the Marvel Crisis Protocol miniatures are 35 millimeter scale, which makes them just a little bit bigger, but that also means that it's easier to paint. You're working with larger volumes, so you're not really, trying to get a really tiny brush, into every nook and cranny on a miniature. You've got nice large volumes to go ahead and paint. Makes it very, very easy and nice to ease a new person into the painting aspect of the hobby. Again, the rules are very, very simple. And that core set, again, it's a great self-contained experience in a box for 2 players. Now, for the cons, and this is what really held the game back from going higher on the list, the character expansions are pricey. So prices can range anywhere from $25 to $65 USD, and you're only getting 1 or 2 characters. Number 2, that core set, again, it's a mandatory buy, but the character assortment in that box may not be to your liking. So you get some Avengers characters, you get some Cabal characters, and I think they have Ultron in there as well. But if you're not a fan of, Hydra and the Cabal or the Avengers, say for instance, if you're like me and you're an X-Men fan, you may not really want to play with any of the miniatures in that box, but you're sort of forced to buy it so that you can get all your tokens and your dice and your measuring gauges and everything. So do be aware of that. And then lastly, the character packs also kind of have that same problem. So for those 2 miniature character packs, it may contain a miniature that you don't want. So for instance, one of the most recent waves was the X-Force team. And so the Deadpool box, which most people who love Marvel Comics love Deadpool. Everybody wants that box. But he's paired with Bob, who is an appropriate minor character from his series, but I'm probably never going to use Bob in any of my games. No offense to Bob, just not my cup of tea. But because he's still in that box, you're paying a premium just to get Deadpool. So that is something that you need to be aware of with this game. Unfortunately, it's just how it is. There are some communities like Facebook swap groups where people will sell the miniatures that they don't want along with their character cards at a reduced cost. So you can always, trade with your friends or find one of those swap communities and maybe pick up single miniatures that you actually wanted for a little bit cheaper. So moving on to number 2, this is another personal favorite of mine, Dropzone Commander by TT Combat. A little bit of history with this game. Originally, it was released by a company called Wargames, which was led by a individual named Dave. Really great guy. And he developed the game literally in his garage. Did all of the 3D modeling for the miniatures himself, wrote all of the background for the universe, got the company, up and running, had worldwide distribution going and everything. And then at some point, and he didn't fully disclose why, but he had decided to close down Wargames. My own personal opinion, I think, for a one-man operation, that was probably way too much on him. He was literally managing all aspects of the business himself. But when he closed Wargames, TT Combat picked up the license for the game, and they kept Dave on as one of the lead designers for the game. So the game is still very much Dave's vision for the game. It's just now being published by TT Combat. So the breakdown here, for entry cost, I gave them 5 out of 5 stars. This is, out of the entirety of the list, this is the most cost-efficient game for a new person to get into. So you've got two options for getting started with the game. Option one, you can buy the two-player starter set and a terrain pack. Option two, if you're just a single person getting into the game, you could buy one of the 4 faction starters that I have up on the screen, a rulebook, and a terrain pack. Either option is only going to run you $105 USD. Now, this game is 10 millimeter scale, so the miniatures are smaller, but because they're smaller, you get more units in your packaging. It also helps to make the game really, really affordable. So for accessibility, I had to dock them a few stars here. So they only got 3 out of 5 stars. Distribution in the UK and across Europe is totally fine. TT Combat is based in Europe. But in the US, distribution dwindled when the license was picked up by TT Combat. It is a little difficult to find product in the US. A lot of people who are in America that like the game, they're ordering from UK companies, and then they're having to pay like really crazy shipping charges because of international shipping. However, I was able to find one US retailer who's on screen, Kick-Ass Mail Order, who they do carry all of the latest product for Dropzone Commander. All of the new releases, they're able to get them. I don't know what kind of distribution magic they have going on. I'm in no way affiliated with Kick-Ass Mail Order, but I have used them for building both my Shaltari and my PHR armies, and I was able to get everything I needed and get it really fast. So I just wanted to make that information available to everyone who might be looking for product. Now, for the rules, I gave them 4 out of 5. The rules are included in the 2-player starter set. They're also available for free on TT Combat's website. The rules are extraordinarily well written. That is one of the things that Dave prided himself on, and it definitely shows through in his work. However, there are a lot of rules for this game, and that can make it slightly intimidating for a newer player. It is a combined arms game, whereas most tabletop war games will focus on one type of warfare. With this, you've got aircraft, you've got infantry, you've got tanks, you've got hover tanks, you've got destructible buildings, you've got, personnel carriers, and all of these different types of units and game elements all have detailed rules about how they work. Again, very well written, very well put together rulebook, but this is probably going to be one of the meatier rule sets out of the 5 games that we're reviewing today. Now, pros and cons. Let's go into the pros. Very affordably priced. Again, it's the cheapest game to get into on the list. With it being that small 10 millimeter scale, that means you really only need to do simple paint jobs. Whenever you put a 10 millimeter model, at roughly 2 feet away from your eyes, it doesn't matter how much detail you painted onto that miniature. At 2 feet, our eyes aren't strong enough to actually be able to see all of that work that you put into it. So an expertly painted 10 millimeter miniature is going to look very similar to a decently painted 10 millimeter miniature at about 2 feet distance away from your face. So simple paint jobs means you can get everything painted up really, really quickly, really easily, and get into playing the game. The terrain packs that I mentioned earlier, they have two. There's a cityscape, and then there's a ruinscape, which is just the cityscape, but the buildings are distressed. Those packs come with enough terrain to completely fill a 6 by 4 foot table, and they retail for £30. It is an insane value. You literally cannot, for £30, build a 6 by 4 foot table filled with terrain for that cheaply. You can't do it. The faction starter boxes, again, excellent value. The expansion units, if you're looking to expand your force, again, excellent value. These units aren't going to break the bank, again, mostly due to their size. And now lastly, I did want to point out, when you start working with smaller scales, so like 15 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 6 millimeter, there are lots of indie rule sets where they will provide a rule set and a rule book for relatively cheap, but you have to source your own miniatures to play the game. And these miniatures work perfectly for that. So one of the big companies, Osprey Publishing, they have tons of rule sets like this. So if you really like these miniatures and maybe you're intimidated by the rule sets, there are other rule sets that you could actually use with these miniatures. And in a future video, I might actually review some of those. So if you guys are interested in that, go ahead and leave me a comment down in the comment section below. Now on to the cons. So those terrain sets, even though they are very cheap, and they're pre-colored and they're great, they are made out of cardstock. So they do require extra care when storing them. You might want to buy sort of like a plastic bin to keep them in so that, nothing can crush them. Number two, again, that minimal US distribution means that it can be hard to find Dropzone Commander products with a reasonable shipping cost. And also, because it's harder to find product, it can also be harder to find an opponent. The game is still very, very popular at a lot of the big US conventions. So like Adepticon, the Nova Open, they will have Dropzone Commander tournaments. However, finding a local player in your area can definitely be a challenge. This might be a game where, maybe you and a friend are deciding together, hey, we're going to go ahead and give this game a shot. Maybe it's a game that, you might play with your family. Or maybe it's a game, if you're interested in, taking a leadership role in your local, wargaming community. Maybe it's a game where, you pick up a couple of starters and you give some demo games at your, your local friendly gaming store, and maybe you start that community in your area. But it's definitely a great game that is worth taking a look at. One last thing, the fan favorite Resistance faction, which is the one faction starter that I did not picture, which I did that for this very reason, is that it does not yet have a plastic starter set. Its starter set is still the old resin version, which has half of the models and does not contain the same value as the other factions' starter sets. In 2020, TT Combat went and revamped all of the other faction starters and moved them from resin to plastic, and when they did that, they doubled the number of models that would come in the packs. So that Resistance faction starter, if you're interested in that one, they are planning on doing one. So if you really love the Resistance, you might want to hold out for it. But if you weren't, looking at the Resistance, all of the other packs awesome value for the money. All right, so moving on to the number one slot, I have Infinity CodeOne by Corvus Belli. And this game, honestly, it takes the cake. Nothing else on the list can really hold a torch to it. So let's get into this breakdown. So entry cost, I gave them 4 out of 5 stars. There's, again, 2 options for getting into this, very similar to Dropzone. So option 1, you can buy the Operation Cloudstrom 2-player starter set. And even though right now it's Operation Cloudstrom, they're actually releasing a new version of this, I believe, in July. The preview week is supposed to start July 5th. So this Operation Cloudstrom box will have a new name. It'll be Operation something else. But as I'm reporting today, the product is Operation Cloudstrom, and it retails for $142.95 USD. Option 2 is to buy a faction action pack, which is really just a single player, single faction starter set, and grab yourself a scenery pack, and that'll run you $136.94. Now, it's worth mentioning the Operation Cloudstrom 2-player starter set. It's going to give you 2 factions, and you'll get 7 miniatures each, so 14 miniatures total. With the action packs, you get 1 faction, but you get 10 miniatures. So with Operation Cloudstrom, you're getting more of a medium-sized force. And then when you buy an action pack, you're getting a really, truly an army in a box. So accessibility, I gave them 4 out of 5 stars. And the reason being, they're not quite as easy to find as Games Workshop products. However, Corvus Belli does distribute their product worldwide, and it is very easy to find their products within the USA as well as across Europe. Pretty much any store that sells Games Workshop product outside of Games Workshop should also have Corvus Belli product. They might not carry the whole product line, but they definitely should have these Infinity CodeOne starter products on their shelves. Now, for the rules, I went ahead and gave them 5 out of 5. They knocked it out of the park with this, and they should be incredibly proud. Historically, so Corvus Belli is a Spanish company, and one of their biggest criticisms over the years has been the translation of their rules from Spanish to English hasn't always been that great. They have definitely listened to that community feedback, and this is honestly their best version yet, and they 1000% did a great job. So the full rules are available for free on Corvus Belli's website. You can also purchase a paperback copy of the book, and the rules are not super complicated, like its big brother, Infinity N4, which those rules are very complicated. And then Operation Cloudstrom also includes a highly detailed pamphlet of learn-to-play scenarios that has very high-quality graphics that walk you through every step of playing the game. And every scenario is meant to be played sequentially. And with each new scenario, they teach you new skills. And then by the time you've played through all of the scenarios, you have learned all of the core rules to the game. So let's dig into those pros and cons. So first up on the pros, again, that 2-player starter set, it's a complete experience in a box. You get 2 armies, you get the playmat, you get this really nice, thick, pre-colored papercraft terrain. Very sturdy, even though it's papercraft, because of the thickness. And these buildings can really take some punishment. The faction starter boxes are still a great deal. You get that single army in a box. experience. If you just wanted to try a faction, you could just pick up that action pack. You don't necessarily need anything else. They actually do give you a selection of usable miniatures for those armies. And, get them built, get them painted, get them on the table. Number 3, the CodeOne miniatures are usable in Corvus Belli's flagship game, Infinity and 4. And then also in their games, they have this innovative reaction mechanic that really makes for exciting gameplay. So, if you're not familiar with most war games, they have this concept of I go, you go. So you do your whole turn, and then, I do my whole turn. Or maybe you move your group of miniatures, and then I get to move my group of miniatures. What Corvus Belli does in CodeOne and Infinity and 4 is my miniatures can react to my opponent doing things. So if you move out of cover into line of sight of one of my miniatures, I can shoot you in your turn. Or if, say, you're a mecha and you move in range of one of my hackers, I can hack you in your turn. So this reaction mechanic, it makes things really, really dynamic. And it actually does, in a way, help to speed up gameplay. With multiple miniatures being able to take reactions, it makes the game way more deadly. Things die very, very easily in Infinity. And that just helps speed up the game. Once you're familiar with the rules, you can easily get through a game in under an hour, which is pretty awesome for a tabletop war game. And over on the cons, so some of the expansion miniatures can be really, really expensive. The biggest culprits of this are the mecha miniatures, which they call tags, or tactical armored gears. These are large metal miniatures, and I have one posted up on the screen for the O12 faction. And with metal, the larger the miniature, the more metal it takes to make it, and the more expensive that miniature is going to cost. Also, with Corvus Belli being a smaller company, and since they do their own miniatures production, sometimes they can run out of stock on hot items. You'll see this a lot with the really, really, really coveted new releases. They will make as many as they can ahead of time, but sometimes they're just not able to meet demand, and those items will go out of stock for a month, sometimes maybe 2, until they can get enough product flowing through their distribution channels again. And then lastly, with their business model, the 2 factions that are in their starter set typically do not have an action pack available. So right now, at the date of filming, Pen Oceania and Eugene for Infinity CodeOne don't have an action pack. Essentially, their action pack is the 2-player starter set box. Now, whenever a new 2-player starter set box comes out, and they do rotate these fairly regularly, I'd say maybe every year or 2, they'll create a new updated version of the 2-player starter box. When they do that, the miniatures from the previous box typically will then go into an action pack. So as I mentioned, next month they're going to be teasing us with the contents of the new 2-player starter set, and I would expect that once that hits retail, around about the same time, maybe a little bit after, the contents of the current Coldstream pack should get split up into individual action packs. All right, so that wraps up the list for my top five. I do have a couple of honorable mentions. First up, we've got Star Wars Legion, which this game is really, really hot. It's exploding right now. And they actually have two starter sets. So there's the Rebellion era starter, which you get the Empire versus the Rebellion. And then there's the Clone Wars era starter, where you get the Republic Clone Army and the Trade Federation. You get medium-sized forces for the two armies included in whichever box that you buy, and you get all of your dice and your gaming components and all your cards and everything in the box. The thing that kept me from putting this on the list, and I really debated, should Star Wars Legion go in there in that number 5 slot, or should Kill Team go in there for that number 5 slot? The thing that kept it off of the list is the terrain. So you do get some scattered terrain. There's some barricades that you can see pictured on the back of the box. However, there is no officially branded terrain pack for Star Wars Legion. It's on each individual player to sort of set up their own gaming table. And because of the size of table that this game requires, that's not easy or cheap for a new player just getting into wargaming. And that terrain really is required to have a good experience. So you'd either be looking at buying 3D printed terrain, maybe buying a 3D printer to print your own terrain, doing, extensive hobby projects to build a table, or, buying pre-made, MDF buildings, for instance. And all of those options, even though they vary wildly in cost, are all very, very expensive for a new person just coming into the hobby. And that was why ultimately I left it off of the list. However, with all of that said, it is a fantastic game. It's actually, it was originally being run by Fantasy Flight Games. It has since moved over to another Asmodee studio, Atomic Mass Games, who also does Marvel Crisis Protocol, which did make the list. So development for the game is in really great hands. I own a lot of these miniatures. They're great. Very fun to paint. If you like the Star Wars license and you're willing to put in that work to, maybe you and a buddy, building a table so that you can have fun, I could definitely recommend Star Wars Legion as a good time. And now over on the right, we have Warhammer Underworlds. I put up a picture of the Dire Chasm starter set. And the thing that kept this off of the list is it's more of a board game / miniatures game / card game hybrid. It's not really a true war game. However, with that said, with the starter box, it is a complete experience within a box. You get all of your tokens, all your cards, you get 2 factions, you get the game boards, you get absolutely everything that you need to play. And then their expansion faction packs, which have new war bands, are also great additions to the game. It's a really, really fun way for maybe board game players or card game players to sort of find that bridge into the miniatures hobby. However, it's not really a true war game, so I ended up leaving it for the honorable mentions. But that's all I've got for today. So let me know what you thought. Did you agree with me? Did you have your own top 5? Maybe there's a game that I didn't mention that you think people should know about. Go ahead and shout it out in the comments down below. I thank you for sticking, through this video. I know it was a long one, but I think this was really good information to get out there for new people starting to explore the wargaming hobby. If you enjoyed the content, please, please, please subscribe, hit that like button, share it with a friend. If you'd like to support us further, we have some merch links down in the description, as well as affiliate links for where you can pick up art supplies for your hobbies. Until next time, thank you for watching, and have a good one. Slay the Grey, Hobby Warriors.